Hello, my name is Carla Brown, and I'm going to be discussing again from Romans 11, today on verses 11 through 24. These rocks again represent or depict the remnant of Israel, but also that we should be a remnant. Just to kind of recap, in the first section that I talked about, Elijah was concerned that there was no one else but him. And God told him that he had a remnant of 7,000 that did not bow their knee to Baal. And so then also later in the next set of verses, it talks about how Israel's heart was hardened, that they had a spirit of stupor, they could not see or hear, and that their backs would be bent forever. Well, in the next set of verses, from verse 11 through 15, it says, "Again I ask, did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. But if their transgression means riches for the world, and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will their full inclusion bring? I am talking to you, Gentiles. Inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, I take pride in my ministry, in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people to envy and save some of them. For if their rejection brought reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead?" So again, God hardened Israel, with the exception of the remnant. And Paul here is talking about this hardening, but that this hardening happened for a purpose. So Israel's hardening, besides the remnant, was allowed. And it was allowed by God so that others could come to faith in Christ. And so since there was a remnant that could understand, then the Gentiles could then learn about this grace and this understanding of who Christ is. So because of this, God allows the Gentiles to come to know Christ. Those that are not of the Jewish faith, the Gentiles who are not of the Jewish faith. So these Gentiles could also then be used. So this rejection from the Israelites of Christ is what opened the door for the rest of the world. So in other words, God allowed this hardening, this struggle, this delusion, this stupor that we read about before to happen to Israel so that the other nations would have the opportunity to come to know the Lord. The rest of the world. So again, God chose Israel to do this. They are the avenue that this takes place through. It's through the Jewish people. Salvation comes through Christ, who was Jewish, but also through Israel's doubts and unbelief. This makes a way for all other nations to come to faith in Christ. God again uses Israel for his purpose and glory. God uses the Gentiles as well for his purpose and glory. It is all about God ultimately. And because of Israel's unbelief, the Gentiles, all the other nations, could come to know Christ. So let's read further. In verse 16 through 21, it says, "If the part of the dough offered as first fruits is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches." Now, before I move on, picture a big lump of dough that someone's using for bread. They're kneading it and all that good stuff. Well, if this dough was made and it's holy, and you take a little piece of the dough out and you offer that as a sacrifice, that little piece of the dough would still be holy. But the rest of the dough is holy as well. Just because you took out some doesn't mean the rest of it's bad. You could take a piece from the left side. Or, no, I'll take some from the right side. Oh, I'll take some from under here. It doesn't matter what part of the dough you take. It's all holy. So the part you take out is holy, and the actual dough part, big part, pile of dough is still holy. It has not changed just because you took a piece out. So keep that in mind. All right, verse 17. If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted. But they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Now, this can kind of be confusing, but it's really not. And I just think this is a beautiful picture. They were broken off, Israel, other than the remnant. So we could be grafted in, the Gentiles, the other nations. But understand and know that it is only by faith that we remain grafted in. When we accept Christ, we are grafted in, and it's through that faith in Christ of his death for us, for our salvation, that we are grafted in by faith. And also keep in mind the term natural branches. Think about that dough. It's one big pile of dough. You pull some of it off and stick it over on the counter. If I took that dough, it's still the dough from the original pile of dough. It's just set over there to the side a little bit. So it's kind of the same thought process with this olive root and the natural root. Because remember, it said up here, though a wild olive shoot, from verse 17, though a wild olive shoot, as a Gentile, as someone from other nations, we are wild olive shoots. We're not from the natural branch. Only those of Jewish descent are from the natural branch, from the natural olive plant. So then, the natural branches were in the tree to begin with, which is Israel. You got that pile of dough. That little piece we took out is still part of that dough. It's just sitting over on the counter somewhere. So the branches that are grafted in can be from another plant, that wild olive shoot. They are not from the natural or original plant. Okay, so that's huge. Let's continue. It says, consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God. Sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. After all, if you were cut out of an olive tree that is wild by nature and contrary to nature, were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? How wonderful. God is grafting them in again. He is grafting Israel in again. His plan, his purpose. Israel will once again have eyes to see, will not be blinded, and can come to faith in Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and be grafted in again to the very tree that they were broken away from. God brings them back to himself. They are simply coming back home and will fit more easily. It's like the dough. You bring that little piece of dough back into the dough and knead it in, it's going to fit a whole lot better than a piece of dough that was somewhere else. So this again is a beautiful picture of God grafting Gentiles in, but grafting back again Israel. Thanks, and I will do the next section later.